Your home. It's your sanctuary. The one place on earth you should feel completely safe. A place to shut out the world, to be yourself, to be vulnerable. But what if that feeling of security was a lie? What if the locks on your doors and the glass in your windows were merely an illusion of safety? What if the noises you dismiss as the house settling are anything but? Tonight, we're delving into the terrifying reality that for some, the monster isn't under the bed. It's inside the walls. These are not urban legends or campfire tales. These are 4 disturbing, true trespassing horror stories. Stories of people who discovered that the sanctity of their home had been violated in the most terrifying ways imaginable. So, lock your doors, check your closets, and pray you're truly alone. Title card: 4 disturbing true trespassing horror stories. Intro music fades into a more subtle, suspenseful score that continues throughout the narration. Host, welcome. For our first story, we travel back in time to Denver, Colorado, in 1941. It's a tale that serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous intruders are the ones you least expect, the ones who slip in unnoticed and make your home their home. This is the story of the Denver Spider-Man. Theodore Edward Coneys was a man who had fallen on hard times. Frail and down on his luck, he remembered an old friend, Philip Peters. In September of 1941, Coneys made his way to Peters' house, perhaps hoping for a handout or a place to stay. When he arrived, he found the house unlocked and empty. Peters was at the hospital visiting his wife. Instead of leaving, Coneys let himself in. While exploring the empty house, he discovered a small, narrow closet with a tiny panel in the ceiling. Curious, the small-statured Coneys managed to squeeze his way through the opening and found himself in a small, dusty attic space. It was barely a room, more of a crawl space, but to a man with nowhere else to go, it was a palace. He decided to stay. For 5 weeks, Coneys lived a phantom existence within Philip Peters' home. Whenever the 73-year-old would leave for the day, Coneys would descend from his hiding spot, help himself to food from the kitchen, and use the facilities before retreating back into the darkness of the attic. It was a bizarre, but seemingly harmless arrangement. But that all changed on October 17. On that fateful day, Coneys, believing Peters was out, came down from the attic to prepare a meal. But he was mistaken. Peters was home, napping in another room. Startled by the unexpected noise, Peters went to investigate and came face to face with the strange, gaunt man in his kitchen. In the ensuing panic and confrontation, Coneys attacked the elderly Peters, tragically beating him to death. But here is where this already horrific story takes an even more disturbing turn. Instead of fleeing the scene of his crime, Theodore Coneys simply went back upstairs. He retreated to his tiny, secret attic room, leaving the body of his victim on the floor below. Police were baffled. They found Peters' body, but all the doors and windows were locked from the inside. There were no signs of a forced entry. It was a seemingly impossible crime. Eventually, with no leads, the investigation grew cold. When Peters' wife returned home, she was plagued by strange occurrences. Food would go missing, strange smells would emanate from odd places, and she would hear faint noises from above. She became convinced the house was haunted and soon moved out, but Coneys remained. For nearly a year, he lived in the house, a ghost in the attic, while the world outside buzzed with rumors of the haunted Peters home. It wasn't until July of the following year, almost a full 11 months after he first moved in, that police, acting on a tip from a neighbor who saw a gaunt face in an upstairs window, finally raided the home and found the emaciated Coneys emerging from his cramped hiding place. The so-called Denver Spider-Man was a spider no more. Our next story brings us into the 21st century and into a place many of our younger viewers will find all too familiar: a college apartment. For a student at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, a series of strange, unexplainable events would culminate in a discovery that sounds like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood horror script. It started with small things. Maddie, a junior at the university, noticed that some of her clothes were disappearing from her closet. Then, handprints started appearing on her bathroom walls. She and her roommates, trying to rationalize the unsettling occurrences, joked that their apartment was haunted. It was easier to believe in a ghost than the terrifying reality of their situation. The true creepy story came to a head one afternoon when Maddie returned to her apartment. "I just hear rattling in my closet," she later recounted. "It sounded like a raccoon in my closet." She called out, asking who was there, but received no answer. Mustering her courage, she opened the closet door. And there he was, a man wearing her clothes. The man, later identified as 30-year-old Andrew Swafford, simply stared back at her. Terrified, Maddie and her roommates ran out of the apartment and called the police. When officers arrived, they found Swafford still in the closet, as if he had no place else to go. The investigation revealed he had been secretly living in their unlocked apartment for an unknown amount of time, trying on their clothes, and, most disturbingly, leaving those handprints on the walls for Maddie and her roommates. The realization that a stranger had been living in such close proximity, sharing their space, their clothes, and their lives without their knowledge, was a violation of the deepest kind. It serves as a terrifying example of true trespassing horror stories. Sometimes, the horror doesn't come from a prolonged, hidden presence, but from a single, terrifying encounter. Our third story is about a person who found themselves the unwilling object of a stranger's unnerving attention, a stranger who would breach the final barrier of their home in a truly bizarre and unsettling fashion. It began on a walk home. The narrator of this account noticed a disheveled man following them. He was stumbling, not in a drunken way, but with an odd limp. When they would stop, he would stop, clumsily pretending to tie his shoe or look at a bench. The man wore a heavy, waterproof fishing coat despite the warm weather. He looked out of place, and his persistence was deeply unsettling. The person being followed managed to get into their apartment building and lock the door behind them, watching as the strange man lingered outside for a while before finally shuffling off. Shaken, they informed their building superintendent about the incident, but tried to put it out of their mind. A few nights later, however, the fear returned with a vengeance. Awakened by a loud crash, they crept out of their bedroom. The first thing they saw was that their front door was busted open, the wood around the latch splintered. And then they smelled a powerful, rancid, fishy odor. Standing in the middle of their dark living room was the man from the other night. He was completely still, just standing there in the darkness, holding a bag. The person grabbed a baseball bat and confronted the intruder, their heart pounding in their chest. Their phone was in another room, and for a terrifying moment, they were alone with this strange, silent man. Thankfully, before anything else could happen, the intruder seemed to snap out of his stupor and fled. The police were called, and they eventually apprehended the man. The story took a tragic turn, as it was revealed he was a local fisherman who had fallen on hard times, losing his business, his family, and seemingly his grip on reality. This trespassing horror story wasn't born of malice in the traditional sense, but of a mind that had tragically frayed. The bag he was carrying? It was full of dead fish, a detail that adds a layer of the surreal and the pathetic to an already terrifying home invasion. 3. For our final story, we journey to a remote cabin in the woods, the classic setting for so many horror tales. But for a group of friends looking for a weekend getaway, the horror became all too real. The group was enjoying their first night, gathered around a fire pit, when one of them noticed something at the edge of the woods. A man, standing perfectly still, just watching them. He was naked. Before they could fully process what they were seeing, he was gone. Shaken, they tried to brush it off as a local eccentric or a prank. But the feeling of being watched lingered. Later that night, the terror escalated. They heard a noise outside and looked out a window to see the same naked man, his face pressed against the glass, staring in at them. They screamed, and he vanished back into the darkness. Now truly terrified, They blocked the doors and windows with furniture and decided to take turns staying awake through the night. The next morning, they discovered something that chilled them to the bone. Bare footprints circled the entire cabin, stopping at every single window. He had been watching them all night, from every angle. Against their better judgment, they decided to stay for their second and final night. As they sat in the living room, trying to feel some semblance of normalcy, one of them went to the kitchen for a drink of water. And then, he froze. He called out to his friends, his voice trembling. They all gathered at the entrance to the kitchen and saw him. The naked man from the woods was inside the house. He was standing in front of the refrigerator, his back to them. His skin was covered in long, raw-looking scratches. He was swaying slowly as if in a trance. In that moment of pure, undiluted terror, the friends armed themselves with whatever they could find: a pocket knife, a fire poker. They flicked on the lights, and in that instant, he was gone. The back door was wide open. He hadn't forced it. It had been unlocked. He had simply walked in. They never saw him again, and were left with the horrifying knowledge of how close they came to a truly monstrous encounter, a chilling conclusion to our collection of true creepy stories. The home is supposed to be a place of warmth, comfort, and above all, security. But as these stories show, sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones that manage to slip past our defenses, unseen and unheard. They remind us that the locks on our doors are only as strong as our vigilance, and that true safety is never guaranteed. Thank you for joining us for this unsettling journey. If you found these stories as chilling as we did, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the darker side of our world. Stay safe, and always check your locks.